Sign over the house or I'm gone, she smirked. So I canceled the Caterer, changed the locks, and watched her elaborate scam crumble into dust. My fiancé gave me a stone-cold ultimatum. Sign over my $350,000 rental property to her parents as a wedding gift. Or the wedding was off. I didn't just call her bluff by canceling the wedding. I dug into her secrets, uncovered a massive financial scam she was running behind my back, and watched her entire family's fraudulent empire collapse in real time. Hey everyone, I am a 5-year-old guy, and until exactly 1 week ago, I was engaged to be married to a 3-year-old woman named Chloe. I wasn't planning on taking this to the internet, but the absolute sheer magnitude of the betrayal I just experienced needs to be documented. I just canceled my wedding, lost thousands in non-refundable deposits, and narrowly escaped a financial trap that would have ruined my life. To understand the sheer audacity of what Chloe tried to pull, you need to understand where I came from. I didn't inherit wealth. I didn't have a trust fund. For the last 11 years, I have been grinding my absolute soul out in the IT and cybersecurity consulting space. When I first started out at 24, I had absolutely nothing. I was literally sleeping on a lumpy hand-me-down sofa in my parents' cramped basement. I lived off bulk jars of peanut butter, cheap bread, and tap water. I wore a horribly fitted, stiff polyester suit that I bought from a thrift store for $12, and I spent my days cold calling local businesses, begging them to let me upgrade their aging network security systems. That first year of my business, I worked 90-hour weeks and took home a pathetic $19,000. It was brutal, soul-crushing work, but I refused to quit. By year 4, the tide finally turned. I secured a few massive corporate contracts, moved into a decent apartment, and built a reputation. Today, I run a highly successful, independent cybersecurity consulting firm. I pull in a very comfortable mid-six-figure income. I have zero debt, no business partners to answer to, and absolute freedom over my schedule. Because I grew up with financial instability, I didn't blow my money on sports cars or designer clothes. Instead, I poured every spare cent into real estate. 4 years ago, I bought my primary residence and aggressively paid off the mortgage. 2 years later, I bought a distressed, absolute wreck of a property on Elmwood Drive. I spent 6 months of my weekends ripping out drywall, laying floors, and upgrading the plumbing to turn it into a beautiful modern rental home. It is currently valued at around $350,000, and it generates a rock-solid $2,200 a month in completely passive rental income. That house is my pride and joy, a physical manifestation of a decade of blood, sweat, and tears. That was exactly where my life was when I met Chloe at a downtown corporate networking mixer. She stood out immediately. She was sharp, articulate, and presented herself as a fiercely independent marketing executive. She had her own apartment, her own car, and talked extensively about her career ambitions. We hit it off instantly. For the first 2 years of our relationship, things were genuinely incredible. She seemed to completely understand my drive. She never complained when I had to take late-night emergency calls from clients, and she always praised my financial discipline. I thought I had found my ultimate teammate, a true equal, who wanted to build an empire together, not someone looking for a free ride. After 2.5 years of dating, I took her on a trip to the mountains and proposed. She wept, said yes, and we set our wedding date for exactly 9 months out. Looking back now, with the absolute clarity of hindsight, the moment that ring slipped onto her finger, a subtle but terrifying shift occurred. The mask didn't slip all at once. It peeled away slowly, starting with the wedding finances. About a month into our engagement, Chloe suggested we open a dedicated joint checking account specifically for the wedding expenses. On paper, it was a brilliantly logical idea. We would both contribute our own money, pay all the vendors from one centralized place, and keep our accounting clean and organized. Chloe, being in marketing, was hyper-organized and volunteered to manage the spreadsheets and vendor contracts. I hate dealing with event planning, so I happily agreed. I transferred a massive $30,000 lump sum into the new account to cover the lion's share of the venue, catering, and major deposits. It was a very generous contribution, but I could easily afford it. Chloe transferred $10,000 from her savings. The agreement was crystal clear. This $40,000 pool was strictly for agreed upon wedding costs. If we needed more, we would discuss it and contribute equally. For the first few weeks, everything looked perfectly normal. I saw the $3,000 $500 deposit for the historic barn venue we booked. I saw the $1,200 retainer for the photographer. I saw the $800 initial payment for the florist. All standard pre-approved expenses. Because I trusted her implicitly, I stopped scrutinizing the account every week and focused on my consulting work. But 2 months later, I casually logged into the banking app to check the balance, and a cold dread started pooling in my stomach. The numbers were dropping way faster than our spreadsheet projected. I started combing through the line items and noticed a bizarre pattern of completely unauthorized charges. There was a $450 charge to a high-end luxury boutique. When I confronted Chloe about it that evening, she casually waved it off, saying she needed special designer shoes for the rehearsal dinner. I let it slide. A week later, a $350 charge popped up for a luxury nail and hair salon. Again, I bit my tongue, chalking it up to normal bridal preparation. I told myself to be the supportive fiancé and not nickel and dime the woman I loved. But the real, glaring wake-up call came when I saw a devastating $1,500 charge to an exclusive, 5-star mountain spa resort. I knew for a fact we had no wedding events planned at a mountain resort. That night, over dinner, I pulled up the statement on my phone and slid it across the table. Chloe, what is this $1,500 charge for the spa? She didn't even blink. She just kept slicing her steak, completely unfazed. Oh, that's the deposit for my bachelorette weekend. The girls and I decided to do a luxury wellness retreat instead of a trashy clubbing weekend. It's much classier. I stared at her, completely dumbfounded. You are paying for your entire bachelorette party out of our shared wedding fund? The fund that I contributed 75% of the money to? It's a wedding-related event, Marcus, she snapped back, her tone suddenly defensive and sharp. Don't be so stingy. The absolute breaking point of my patience came a week later when I reviewed the statement again and found 4 separate hotel charges totaling an insane $3,000. All the reservations were booked for the exact weekend of our wedding. I furiously added up the numbers, printed out the statement, and confronted her in the living room. Chloe sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes like I was a nagging child. Those rooms are for my parents, my sister Mia, my aunt, and my cousins. They are all flying in from out of state. They need places to stay. Chloe, I raised my voice, the frustration finally boiling over. We explicitly sat down and agreed that both of our families would handle their own travel and accommodation costs. My parents already booked and paid for their own hotel room. Well, your parents are rich, she yelled back, crossing her arms. My family isn't as well off as yours. They shouldn't have to stress about money and hotel costs during our special weekend. Your parents can afford it. Mine can't. Let me clarify something right here. My parents are not rich. They are retired public school teachers who spent 40 years living below their means, clipping coupons, and saving diligently for their retirement. They have money because they are financially responsible. Chloe's parents, on the other hand, are chronic financial disasters. Her dad works at a local hardware store, and her mom is a part-time receptionist. They make a decent combined income, but they constantly lease brand new luxury cars they cannot afford, take lavish cruises on high-interest credit cards, and blow their paychecks on designer clothes. They are currently renting a 2-bedroom apartment for $1,600 a month because their credit is too destroyed to ever qualify for a mortgage. But pointing out her parents' absolute lack of financial literacy would instantly make me the villain. We only have one wedding in this life, Marcus, Chloe argued, using the phrase that had become her ultimate weapon for every insane expense. Why not make sure everyone we love is taken care of? Meanwhile, she hadn't added a single penny to the joint account since her initial $10,000 deposit. She was draining my hard-earned cash to fund her family's luxury vacation. The account balance plummeted from $40,000 to $18,000 before we had even paid the final catering bill. But every time I tried to establish a firm financial boundary, she would burst into tears, accuse me of causing her extreme emotional distress, and storm out of the room. I foolishly told myself it was just temporary wedding stress. I told myself things would normalize after we said I do. That was the single, biggest, most dangerous mistake of my life. I was willfully ignoring the fact that Chloe was showing me exactly who she was, and the ultimate test of her entitlement was rapidly approaching. Exactly 6 weeks before the wedding date, on a bright Sunday morning, we were sitting at my kitchen table. We had our laptops open, coffee mugs steaming, and wedding binders spread out everywhere. We had just finalized the catering headcount. It had ballooned to 160 people because Chloe absolutely insisted on inviting distant cousins and random coworkers she hadn't spoken to in years. I was quietly doing the mental math on how much the extra plates would cost me when she abruptly closed her laptop, folded her hands, and looked at me with an incredibly serious, calculated expression. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about the traditional gifts we give to our parents at the wedding," she said, her voice dropping to this soft, almost rehearsed tone. I looked up, slightly confused. "Like the engraved picture frames in the thank you albums we talked about?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "Something bigger. Something actually meaningful. Your parents are completely comfortable. They own their home, they have pensions, they don't need anything material from us. But my parents are struggling, Marcus. They've been trapped in that same depressing rental apartment for 8 years. The rent keeps going up, and they have nothing to show for it." I nodded slowly, still completely oblivious to the absolute bombshell she was about to drop. "Okay, so what are you suggesting? You want to help them with a security deposit for a nicer place? Or maybe buy them some new furniture?" Chloe leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that genuinely made the hairs on my arms stand up. "I think we should give them the Elmwood Drive house." The kitchen went dead silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. I literally stopped breathing for a full 5 seconds. I stared at her face, desperately searching for a smirk, a giggle, any sign that this was a bizarre, poorly timed joke. Her face was completely stone-cold serious. "Excuse me?" I whispered, my brain struggling to process the sheer audacity of the words that just came out of her mouth. "You want me to give your parents my rental property? Think about it logically, Marcus," she continued, speaking entirely too fast, like a salesperson rushing through a pitch before the customer can say no. "You don't even live there! It's just sitting there, collecting passive income, while my parents are practically facing homelessness with these rising rent prices. Giving them the Elmwood house would permanently solve their housing crisis. It would change their lives forever, and it would show them how deeply you value our family." I slowly pushed my coffee mug away, my hands actually shaking from the sheer rush of adrenaline and anger. "Chloe, are you out of your mind? That house is worth $350,000. It generates $26,000 a year in rental income. I spent 6 months of my life bleeding in that house to renovate it. You are asking me to hand over a $350,000 asset as a wedding gift?" She waved her hand in the air dismissively, rolling her eyes as if I was complaining about a $20 restaurant tab. "Oh, stop being so dramatic. It's not like you are losing the money. The house still exists. You're just transferring an asset to family. It would just belong to people who actually need it, instead of you hoarding it for extra cash you don't even need to survive." The casual, flippant way she dismissed a decade of my grueling hard work was sickening. She was talking about my property like it was a spare television sitting in the garage. "I bought that property as a long-term financial investment," I said, forcing my voice to remain low and steady, though I was screaming inside. "It is a core pillar of my retirement plan. I am absolutely not giving it away to anyone, let alone your parents." Her sweet, persuasive demeanor vanished instantly. A dark, vicious scowl twisted her features. "Because we are about to be married, Marcus," she yelled, slamming her hand on the kitchen table so hard the coffee mugs rattled. "Marriage means sacrifice. It means putting your spouse's family's needs above your own selfish financial hoarding. If you really loved me, this wouldn't even be a debate. It would mean everything to me. And what exactly are you sacrificing for my family?" I shot back, the anger finally breaking through. "What is the $350,000 equivalent gesture from your side?" She scoffed, looking at me with pure disgust. "Your parents don't need anything. That's not the point. I am offering you my love. I am offering you my youth. I am offering to build a life with you. Isn't that worth more than some stupid rental income?" The manipulation was so incredibly toxic, so blatantly transparent, that I actually felt a wave of nausea wash over me. She wasn't just entitled. She viewed my wealth as her rightful property, and she was trying to emotionally blackmail me into signing it away. "Chloe, listen to me very carefully," I said, looking her dead in the eyes. "I am not giving your parents my house. The answer is absolutely, unequivocally, no. Never." When she realized I was standing completely firm, she erupted. She sprang up from the chair and started pacing around the kitchen, screaming at the top of her lungs. She called me a selfish, greedy, materialistic pig. She accused me of hating her family. She acted like I was violently robbing her parents by simply refusing to give them a house they had absolutely zero claim to. To Chloe, my refusal to hand over a massive real estate asset wasn't a boundary, it was a vicious personal attack. Then she stopped pacing, walked right up to me, and delivered the ultimate threat. "Fine," she hissed, grabbing her purse and her car keys from the counter. "I'm going to pack a bag and go stay with my parents. And I am not coming back until you set your mind straight about what marriage actually means." She walked to the front door, yanked it open, and turned back to look at me with a sickeningly smug expression. "Call me when you're ready to be a real husband, instead of a selfish landlord. If you don't sign off the house to my parents, the wedding's off." She slammed the door so hard the framed pictures on the hallway wall rattled. I sat alone in the deafening silence of my kitchen for a full hour. My fiancé had just tried to extort a $350,000 house from me by holding our wedding hostage. The most terrifying part wasn't the demand itself. It was the absolute, unshakable confidence she had when she made it. She genuinely expected me to cave. She expected me to prioritize avoiding the embarrassment of a canceled wedding over protecting my life savings. That is the exact moment I realized I couldn't just walk away. I needed to know exactly what she was plotting behind my back. Update 1. Chloe stayed at her parents' apartment for 2 full days without sending a single text or making a single call. Honestly, it was the most glorious, peaceful 48 hours I had experienced in almost a year. No screaming about flower arrangements, no passive-aggressive comments about my work schedule, just pure, unadulterated silence. On Tuesday morning at exactly 9:15 a.m., my phone buzzed. Chloe's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. "Hello?" I said, keeping my voice completely neutral. "Hi, babe," she said. Her tone was completely bizarre. She wasn't angry. She sounded chipper, professional, almost like a real estate agent calling to follow up on a showing. "Have you had time to think about our discussion regarding Elmwood?" She was talking about a $350,000 extortion attempt, like it was a dinner reservation. "I have thought about it," I replied coldly. "And my answer has not changed. The house is mine. I am not gifting it to your parents." There was a long, heavy pause on the line. I could practically hear the gears grinding in her head. She had probably spent the last 2 days pumping her parents up, telling them the house was practically theirs, picking out paint colors for the living room. "Look," she finally said, her voice dropping a full octave into a chilling, icy tone. "I told you what I need to feel secure in this marriage. If you can't provide that, then maybe we need to officially postpone the wedding until you are ready to be the partner I deserve." There it was, the explicit, undeniable threat. "Give me the house, or I cancel the wedding." "Let me think about it," I lied smoothly. "This is a massive financial decision, Chloe. Give me until Friday to process everything and figure out the logistics." Her entire demeanor flipped instantly. The ice melted, replaced by a sickeningly sweet, victorious tone. "Oh, Marcus, I knew you would come around. Take all the time you need, babe. This is going to be so amazing. My mom is literally in tears of joy right now. We love you so much." She hung up, absolutely convinced she had won. She thought she had me cornered. The second the call ended, I immediately dialed my best friend, David. David and I went to college together. And he is now a highly ruthless, highly successful corporate and family law attorney. I spent an hour on the phone with him, laying out every single insane detail of the situation. "Marcus, you need to pack her up and run for your absolute life," David said, his voice dead serious. "This isn't just bridezilla behavior. This is calculated, predatory financial manipulation. She is holding the wedding hostage to extort a massive real estate asset. Do not marry this woman under any circumstances." David walked me through the brutal realities of our state's property laws. Even though I owned the house before marriage, if I ever accidentally commingled funds to pay for its maintenance, or if she managed to get her name on any related documents after we tied the knot, she could potentially drag me through years of hell in a divorce court trying to claim half its value. "Here is your homework," David instructed. "Document every single thing. Screenshot every text. If you live in a one-party consent state for recording, which we do record every phone call from here on out, do not transfer a single dime. And absolutely do not let her anywhere near the deed to that house." Next, I called my accountant. I explained the situation and told him to freeze any and all joint financial planning we had started for the marriage. Then, I logged into the Chase joint wedding account. The balance was sitting at $18,000. Since I had initially deposited $30,000 and she only put in $10,000, legally and mathematically, the remaining funds were entirely mine. I transferred the entire $18,000 straight back into my private, sole proprietor checking account. Let her try to fund her family's luxury hotel rooms with a zero balance. But something about Chloe's extreme confidence was still eating away at me. She was way too sure of herself. She had told me on the phone that her mom was in tears of joy. Why would her mom be crying over a house I hadn't even agreed to give them yet? I decided to do some digital digging. I pulled out my laptop and logged into the remote security system I have installed at the Elmwood rental property. I have high-definition ring cameras on the front porch, the back patio, and overlooking the driveway to ensure the tenants don't run illegal sublets or trash the place. The current tenants were out of town for a 2-week European vacation, so the house was empty. I scrubbed through the motion-activated footage from the past 3 days. When I hit Wednesday afternoon, the exact day after Chloe had stormed out of my house, my blood ran absolutely freezing cold. There, on my 1080p security feed, was Chloe's white Lexus pulling into the driveway of my rental property. And she wasn't alone. Her mother and father stepped out of the passenger doors. I sat in my home office, physically shaking with rage, as I watched the three of them casually stroll around my property for over an hour. Chloe had a spare key. She must have secretly made a copy months ago when I let her hold my key ring during a grocery run. She unlocked the front door and let her parents inside my house. 10 minutes later, the back patio camera caught them walking out into the yard. Her father was literally holding a yellow steel tape measure, measuring the dimensions of the wooden deck. Her mother was pointing at the azalea bushes, making sweeping gestures with her hands like she was explaining how she was going to rip them out and plant a vegetable garden. Chloe was smiling, nodding, and pointing up at the roof. They weren't just looking at the house, they were planning their move-in. They were treating my life's work like it was their newly purchased toy. But the betrayal didn't stop there. I picked up my phone and called Jessica, the regional manager of the property management company I pay to handle the day-to-day tenant issues at Elmwood. "Hey Jessica, it's Marcus," I said. "Quick question. Has anyone reached out to the office regarding the Elmwood property in the last week?" "Oh, hi Marcus," Jessica replied cheerfully. "Yes, actually. Your fiancée Chloe called the office on Tuesday. She said you were incredibly busy with some urgent IT contracts and asked her to handle the insurance appraisal for the property. She authorized us to send a third-party appraiser over. I gave them the lockbox code since the tenants are away. We just got the report back this morning. The property appraised at exactly $335,000. Great news for your portfolio." I gripped the edge of my desk so hard my knuckles turned completely white. My vision literally tunneled. "Jessica," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I never authorized an appraisal. I never asked Chloe to call you. She impersonated my authority to gain access to my financial assets behind my back. Please immediately revoke any and all access she has and flag her name in your system. If she calls again, you tell her absolutely nothing, and you call the police." Jessica gasped, profusely apologizing. But I didn't blame her. Chloe had weaponized her status as my future wife to commit fraud. She didn't just want the house. She had secretly appraised it to know exactly how much wealth she was extracting from me. And worse, she had given her parents a private tour of a home occupied by my paying tenants. That night my phone buzzed. It was a text from Chloe. "Just had dinner with my parents. They are so unbelievably excited, Marcus. Mom is already looking at new curtains for the living room. I told them how generous you are. Also, I was talking to my sister, and honestly, since it becomes community property once we are married anyway, this just makes the most sense to do it now so they can settle in before the wedding. Love you." There it was, the smoking gun. She genuinely believed that marrying me would automatically grant her a 50% legal ownership of my premarital real estate. She thought she was being a brilliant mastermind, forcing me to hand over the house before the wedding so I wouldn't realize she was planning to claim it all anyway. Except, she was an idiot who didn't understand the law. I didn't reply to the text. I didn't need to. I had everything I needed. I spent Thursday morning making a series of very quiet, very calculated phone calls to every single wedding vendor. The venue, the caterer, the florist, the photographer, the band. I canceled every single one of them. Because the wedding was still 6 weeks out, I lost about $8,000 in non-refundable deposits. But I managed to save the rest. I told the vendors to keep the cancellations strictly confidential until Monday. I was ready to drop the hammer. Update 2. Friday morning arrived. Exactly at 9 a.m., Chloe called me. "Good morning, future husband. she sang into the phone, her voice dripping with fake sugary sweetness. So? Have you figured out the logistics for the house transfer? My dad knows a guy who can fast-track the deed paperwork so we can get it done by next week. I have figured everything out, I said, my voice completely flat and devoid of any emotion. The wedding is canceled. I am not marrying you. We are entirely, permanently done. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. For a solid 10 seconds, the only sound was her ragged breathing. What? What kind of sick joke is this, Marcus? She finally whispered, her voice trembling. It's not a joke, I replied, pulling up the security footage on my monitor just to watch her parents measuring my deck one more time. I know everything, Chloe. I know you forged my authorization to get an appraisal from my property manager. I know you used a copied key to give your parents a private tour of my house while my tenants were on vacation. And I know you think marriage automatically turns my assets into your community property. You don't love me. You love my net worth. And you got caught trying to steal it. She completely lost her mind. The fake sweetness vanished, replaced by the screeching, hysterical wail of a cornered animal. She started screaming so loudly the audio on my phone actually distorted. She called me a psycho for having cameras. She tried to gaslight me, claiming she was just surprising her parents with the idea and that the appraisal was just to help me with my taxes. When I laughed at her pathetic lies, she resorted to pure venom. She told me I was a miserable, stingy loser who would die alone because no woman would ever put up with my obsession with money. I'm keeping the wedding account money, she shrieked. You owe me for wasting 3 years of my life. Check the account, Chloe, I said calmly. I took my $18,000 back. You have exactly $0 to pay for your family's luxury hotel rooms. Come get your belongings from my house by 5 p.m. today, or they go in the dumpster. I hung up the phone and instantly blocked her number. The fallout was nuclear. Within 30 minutes, my phone was blowing up with furious texts from her father, her mother, and her sister Mia. Her dad left a voicemail threatening to come to my house and beat the greed out of me. I didn't engage. I called David. We immediately drafted a brutal, legally binding cease and desist letter. We attached high-resolution screenshots of the Ring camera footage, a copy of the unauthorized appraisal request, and her text message admitting she thought she was getting community property. The letter explicitly stated that if her family contacted me again, or if they attempted to smear my name on social media, I would publicly release the entire dossier of their attempted extortion and file police reports for trespassing and fraud. David had a courier hand-deliver the letter to her parents' apartment that afternoon. At 4:30 p.m., Chloe and her sister Mia showed up at my house. I had already packed every single item she owned into 3 large cardboard boxes and placed them on the front porch. I stood in the doorway, the deadbolt locked, watching them through the screen door. Chloe looked absolutely destroyed. Her makeup was smeared, her eyes were bloodshot, and she was shaking. Marcus, please, she sobbed, pressing her hands against the screen mesh. I'm sorry, I pushed too hard. I was just stressed about my parents. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. I love you. You don't love me, I said, staring at her with absolute disgust. You love what I can buy you. You played a stupid game, and you lost the jackpot. Take your boxes and get off my property before I call the police for trespassing. Mia tried to step up, glaring at me. You are a monster. She made one mistake, and you're throwing away 3 years? Her mistake was thinking I was stupid, I replied, and I slammed the heavy wooden door right in their faces, engaging the newly installed smart lock. I watched them lug the boxes to their car on the security feed and drive away. But here is the absolute most insane, mind-blowing twist to this entire nightmare. Because Chloe had committed identity fraud by impersonating me to the property manager, David strongly advised me to hire a private investigator to run a deep-dive background check on her and her family to ensure she hadn't opened any secret credit cards in my name. I paid the PI a hefty retainer, and 3 days later, he handed me a 50-page dossier that completely blew my mind. Chloe's parents weren't just struggling with rent. They were actively facing a brutal eviction. They hadn't paid rent in 8 months, and their landlord was taking them to court. But that wasn't the worst part. Chloe was in massive, crippling financial ruin. For the entire 3 years we were dating, she had been hiding over $45,000 in high-interest credit card debt. She lived a fake luxury lifestyle to impress her marketing friends, entirely funded by plastic. But the absolute kicker? 2 weeks before she demanded I give her parents the house, Chloe had gone to a shady, high-risk online private lender to secure a $50,000 personal loan. to pay off her credit cards and her parents' back rent. To get approved for that massive loan without my knowledge, Chloe had forged my signature on a completely fake residential lease agreement. She submitted fraudulent documents to the lender claiming that her parents were renting the Elmwood property from me for $3,500 a month and that she was a co-owner of the property receiving half the rental income. She used my house and my forged signature as collateral proof of income to secure a fraudulent loan. The lender had given her a conditional approval, but they required proof of the deed transfer to her name before they would release the final funds. That is why she was so incredibly desperate. That is why she demanded I give her the house. That is why she got the appraisal. She wasn't trying to give her parents a cute wedding gift. She was trying to secure the deed to my house, to finalize a massive loan fraud scheme, to save herself and her parents from absolute financial and legal ruin. When I canceled the wedding and locked her out of my life, her entire house of cards instantly vaporized. I immediately took the PI's findings straight to the police department and filed a massive report for identity theft, forgery, and attempted wire fraud. The police opened an active criminal investigation into Chloe. When the online lender found out the lease agreement was forged, they completely dropped the hammer on her. As of today, my wedding is officially canceled. I lost $8,000 in deposits, but I consider it the cheapest, most effective divorce I could have ever bought. Chloe is currently facing felony charges for forgery and fraud. She was fired from her marketing job when the police showed up at her office to question her. Her parents were officially evicted from their apartment last Friday. And because their credit is completely annihilated, they are currently living out of a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city. Meanwhile, I am sitting on my back patio, drinking a cold beer, watching the sunset. My consulting business just signed a massive new contract. The Elmwood property is still safely in my name, generating $2,200 a month in passive income. And I have never felt more incredibly blissfully free in my entire life.